Aerial lift devices, sometimes referred to as mobile elevating work platforms, or MEWPs, can provide easier and safer access to utility lines and other elevated work sites. The use of aerial lifts is common, but there are many hazards associated with their use. Falls, electrocutions, and tip-overs are some hazards that MEWP operators encounter. Proper training and following safety regulations and procedures are necessary to ensure the safety and well-being of all involved in their use. Aerial lifts include the following types of vehicle-mounted aerial devices: extensible boom aerial devices, aerial ladders, articulating boom aerial devices, vertical towers, or a combination of any of the above. The vehicle may be a truck, trailer, or an all-terrain vehicle. This training program will cover the following: hazards associated with aerial devices, design requirements, selecting the correct lift, aerial device markings, general training, retraining, familiarization, proof of training, operational inspections and function test, periodic inspections, operating procedures and safety, transporting. There are several dangerous hazards associated with the use of aerial devices, which can lead to personal injury and even death. Some of the hazards include falls from elevated level, objects falling from the platform, tip-overs, ejections from the platform, electrical shock, entanglement, and contact with objects, ceilings, and other overhead objects. Aerial devices must have both upper and lower controls for positioning the boom. Controls must be clearly identified as to their function, protected from damage, and protected from unintentional actuation. The boom positioning and material carrying attachment controls must return to a neutral position when released. Platforms, other than buckets or baskets, must have a guardrail system. The top rail must be 42 inches high, plus or minus 3 inches above the platform surface, and be designed to withstand 300 pounds of force in any direction without failure. The mid-rail, halfway between the top rail and the platform, must be designed to withstand 300 pounds of force in any direction without failure. The platform must have toe boards or kick plates on all sides. Toe boards or kick plates can be omitted at the access opening. The minimum height must be 4 inches. Flexible materials such as cables, chains, or rope may be used across openings not more than 30 inches wide. The boom, platform, or platform mounting must have anchorages for an occupant harness. They must be easily identified, and the number of anchorages should equal or exceed the number of permissible occupants. More than one occupant may attach to a single anchorage if it is rated and identified as being for more than one person. Anchorages must be capable of withstanding a static force of 3,600 pounds for each person allowed on the attachment without reaching ultimate strength. Anchorage surfaces must be free from sharp edges. When selecting a lift, there are some important issues that must be considered. Most importantly, the lift must be suitable for the type of work being performed. Some work requires a lift that is equipped with additional features, such as electrical outlets, compressed air connectors, piped water supply, or securing racks. The terrain in which the lift will be utilized will eliminate some lifts from consideration. And the number of employees and equipment needed affects the type of lift that can be used. The aerial device must have an identification plate with all the specifications of the lift. Some of the information it must contain includes make, model, serial number, and year of manufacture, name and location of manufacturer, rated load capacity, and rated platform height. Only personnel who have received general instructions by a qualified person regarding the inspection, application, and operation of aerial devices, including recognition and avoidance of hazards associated with their operation, can operate an aerial device. The operator must understand and have a knowledge of all aspects of operations, including, but not limited to, the following: purpose and use of manuals, pre-start inspections, responsibilities concerning problems affecting operations of the lift, stability factors, workplace inspections, applicable safety standards and regulations, warnings and instructions, proper use of fall protection, actual operation of the aerial device, and stowing device for transport and precautions related to moving the MEWP. Operators must demonstrate that they understand how to use the lift and must be retrained if they do not demonstrate the skill or understanding needed for safe operating procedures. Employees must be retrained in at least the following situations: an accident or near miss occurs during use, changes in the type of lift, fall protection, falling object protection, or other equipment present a hazard which was not previously known to the employee, and when inadequacies in any affected employee's work involving lifts indicate that the employee has not retained the requisite proficiency. Employers must ensure the trained operator is familiarized with the specific MEWP to be used before authorizing the operator to use it. The operator must operate the aerial device for a sufficient period of time to achieve proficiency in the actual operation of the aerial device. When authorized, a qualified person may self-familiarize. Familiarization includes location of the manufacturer's operation manuals and confirmation they are present, manufacturer's warnings and instructions, purpose and function of all controls, features, and devices, and safety devices and operating characteristics specific to the aerial device. Records of training should be retained for at least the period the training is valid. Training documentation must include the following information: name of trainee, name of entity providing training, name of qualified trainer, date of training, identification of the make and model of the MEWPs on which the operator has been trained, and specific period training is valid. A pre-start inspection of the lift must be performed daily before each use, as well as an inspection of the surrounding worksite in which the lift will be utilized. A function test should also be performed. Prior to each work shift, a pre-start inspection must be performed by the operator to verify the equipment and all components are in safe operating condition. Follow the manufacturer's recommendations and include the following: balance sensors, fluid levels, leaks of fluids, wheels and tires, lower level controls, horn, gauges, lights, and backup alarms. Walk around visual inspection looking for damaged components, cracks or corrosion, excessive wear, and any loose, deformed, or missing bolts, pins, fasteners, locking devices, and covers. Operating and emergency controls. Fiberglass and insulating components for visible damage and contamination. Missing or unreadable placards, warnings, or operational and instructional markings. Hydraulic, air, pneumatic, fuel, and electrical systems. Guardrail system, and the electrical system for malfunction, signs of excessive deterioration, dirt, and moisture accumulation. The function test is to include, but not be limited to, the setup of the aerial device for operation, including outriggers and stabilizers. The test should cycle the boom function through its complete range of motion from the lower controls, unless this would create a hazard. And finally, test the operation of emergency controls. Check the emergency descent system by raising the platform a few feet and then turning the lift off and using the auxiliary power to lower the lift. Before and during the use of the MEWP, the operator must perform a worksite inspection and check for possible hazards, including, but not limited to, ditches, drop-offs, holes, excessive slopes, and unstable ground surfaces, subsurface chambers, debris and floor obstructions, overhead obstructions and electrical conductors, hazardous locations and atmospheres, weather conditions and high winds, presence of personnel and other equipment, and traffic hazards. A periodic inspection is required at least once in every 12-month period. This inspection must be documented and kept on record for a period of at least 5 years, or as required by applicable laws. Any suspected items shall be carefully examined or tested, and a determination made by a qualified person as to whether they constitute a safety hazard. All unsafe items must be replaced or repaired before use. Some of the items which must be inspected include structural members for deformation, cracks, or corrosion. All parts, such as pins, bearings, shafts, gears, rollers, locking devices, chains, etc., for wear, cracks, distortion. The complete hydraulic and pneumatic system, including relief valve settings, oil lever, fittings, hoses, cylinders, filters, compressors, pumps, motors, and generators, electrical systems and components, performance test of all boom movements, bolts and other fasteners, as well as all welds, identification, operational, and instructional markings, electrical insulating components. The operator is responsible for their own safety as well as the safety of others while operating a lift. Any safety-related issue or malfunction must immediately be reported. The lift should discontinue operations and be taken out of service until all problems are properly resolved. When operating an aerial device, fall protection is required for all employees who perform work while using a lift. If the lift is used according to manufacturer's guidelines and all safety precautions are being followed, the chance of any fall is minimal. Guardrails and buckets provide some fall protection, but due to the catapulting characteristics of lifts, it is necessary to have additional fall protection. All platform occupants must use appropriate fall protection connected to the aerial device anchorages. A full-body harness should be worn, and a lanyard attached to the boom or basket when working from an aerial lift. The length of the lanyard must conform to the lift manufacturer's guidelines. Tie off to an adjacent structure is not allowed because of the possibility of being pulled out when the lift is moved. Access gates and openings must be closed. Employees should always stand firmly on the floor of the lift. They should not sit or climb on the basket or guardrails, or use planks, ladders, or other items to attain a higher work position. If additional height is needed, the lift should be extended, or if necessary, use a different lift that is more appropriate for the job. Your employer and the manufacturer of the lift will provide more precise fall protection rules and guidelines. Manufacturer's guidelines must always be followed. Never exceed the load capacity limits as indicated by the manufacturer. Operation manuals provided by the manufacturer must be stored in a weatherproof compartment on the MEWP. Operators must read and understand the manual or have it explained to them. Never override hydraulic, mechanical, or electrical safety devices. Overriding the safety devices is prohibited, whether during normal operation or rescue, except in accordance with the manufacturer's prescribed safety override procedures. Horizontal loading must be avoided unless the MEWP is designed accordingly. Adding material or personnel at height may be done, provided the manufacturer does not prohibit such activities. The additional load must not exceed the rated capacity of the configuration being used. Be aware, the load sensing system may not provide protection in these situations. Personnel may only vacate or enter a raised aerial platform if not prohibited by the manufacturer, and only if they comply with OSHA regulations. Do not carry objects larger than the platform. Always follow manufacturer's instructions and limits. No modifications or additions that affect the stability, mechanical, hydraulic, or electrical integrity or the safe operation of the aerial device shall be made without the written approval of the manufacturer. Markings on the aerial device must not be removed, defaced, or altered. Lower controls of any aerial device must not be used with personnel in the platform except for operator rescue or platform recovery. Always be aware of overhead clearance and overhead objects. Do not position aerial devices between overhead hazards. Treat all overhead power lines and communication cables as energized and stay at least 10 feet away with any body part, conductive object, or any part of the MEWP. A qualified person must be consulted in all other situations concerning electrical hazards. Make sure the power, utility, or power line workers de-energize power lines in the vicinity of the work. Brakes must be set, and if the lift has outriggers, they must be positioned on pads or a solid surface. Wheel chocks must be used on inclines, provided it can be done safely. Set up work zone warnings, such as cones and signs, to warn others. The aerial device, including the stabilizers, must be placed in the manufacturer's recommended configuration when being transported. Ensure the lift is lowered and safely resting on the supports to avoid any damage or possible tip-over while being transported. Raise the outriggers if the lift has them. Remove pads used for outriggers and wheel chocks. Check operator's manual for any additional procedures. Mobile elevating work platforms are useful pieces of equipment in the construction and warehouse industry. Be familiar with the type of lift you use and the safety aspects of the lift. Finally, before using any lift, make sure you have had the proper training for the type of lift you are using.